Teaching without learning is just talking. Angelo and Cross, 1993. Learning is an active process, but unfortunately one that often takes place independently of teaching. Angelo and Cross described a variety of classroom assessment techniques that provide a toolkit for instructors to contribute and expand the learning process through a combination of self-assessment and instructor feedback, rather than students merely concentrating on simply remembering and reproducing what is presented by their instructor. Welcome to my video on classroom assessment techniques, where we'll explore the use of one of Angelo and Cross's learning activities, the case study. An often overlooked aspect of learning is evaluation. From an instructor's perspective, evaluation may have many goals. However, promoting cognitive growth and academic skills of students ranks high as a priority. This cannot occur without a continuous flow of information to assess a student's depth of understanding. Traditionally, evaluation occurs at the end of an instructional period. A student writes a final exam that tests their knowledge against course outcomes. Evaluation, however, is now being recognized as playing an important role in the learning process itself. Evaluation is more than just a summative tool. Aston concluded that the amount of student learning and personal development associated with any educational program is directly proportional to the quality and quantity of student involvement in that program. Miriam and Barema described self-directed learning as learning where you intentionally sought the learning, planned your learning, took responsibility for your learning, controlled your learning, and evaluated the outcome. Evaluation is key to deepening a learning experience. It stands to reason then that student involvement in evaluation is a key factor in students getting the most out of each learning experience. How can we evaluate then during the learning process? How can an instructor help shift a student's perspective to the big picture rather than simply concentrating on learning whatever a student thinks will be on the test? How do we immerse a student in assessing their own progress while there is still time to incorporate feedback before more formal evaluation occurs? A common issue students face is how to recognize what problem they are being asked to solve. Problem recognition tasks are a form of classroom assessment that assists students with this issue. Students are provided with examples of common problem types and asked to identify the different problem type each example represents. Problem recognition tasks can be expanded from identifying problem types to matching solution methods, helping students to develop diagnostic skills and become effective problem solvers. The case study is an example of a problem recognition task that can be applied when students need to solve broad problems that require critical thinking and analysis. Let's look at a specific example of how to use a case study as a problem recognition task. Hospitality law is a course I teach that requires grasping broad knowledge of general areas of the law that apply to the hospitality industry. To achieve the course outcomes, students must be able to determine what area of the law is applicable to a problem and how the law would be applied to solve a conflict. Angelo and Cross provide a step-by-step procedure to using a case study to assist students with learning how to achieve this outcome. Step 1. Choose examples of several different but related problem types that students find difficult to distinguish. I chose 4 cases, 2 that involved an injury, requiring the elements of tort law to solve, and 2 that involved contracts, requiring the elements of contract law to solve. Step 2. Determine whether information will be provided about the types of problems students are to recognize. As this was the first exposure of my students to the general areas of the law we would study, I chose to provide information through a series of guiding questions that directed students to the important elements of the case. These questions included: which part of the law applies to the case? What arguments and defenses are available to the plaintiff and defendant? What conclusions could be drawn? And what would the students decide if they were the judge? Step 3. Assess the difficulty of the task by asking a colleague or advanced student to verify your example choices. By asking for feedback, I was able to determine whether the exercise would result in the outcome I intended, to assist students with identifying the general areas of the law applicable to the hospitality industry in a reasonable amount of time in class so as to be effective. Step 4. Present the example problems to students and allow students twice or 3 times the amount of time it took a colleague to respond. I presented each case to the class as a whole for discussion. We read each case together and began discussing which elements immediately struck students as important to each case. I then presented the guiding questions. After a brief discussion in class, students were split into 4 groups, each focusing on one of the cases. Each group was asked to apply the guiding questions to their case and then report back to the class the conflict to be solved, the area of the law that applied, and the general analysis that would be undertaken to make valid arguments on both sides of their case. I chose this technique because I could use specific examples from the industry my students are training for to demonstrate real-world connection of the general topic of law to the industry. Further, I could repeat this technique throughout the semester as we dove deeper into the different areas of the law. What was important in this initial exercise was to become comfortable with determining which area of the law applied to each case. We could then proceed to more complex problem resolution tasks that would involve learning and applying specific arguments available to the plaintiff, defenses available to the defendant, and likely consequences of possible verdicts that would occur under the different areas of law. Repeating this task with greater depth over the semester prepared students to assess a case individually as part of their final formal evaluation at the end of the course. Angelo and Cross highlight several advantages of using problem recognition tasks. These include being a quick, simple way to assess diagnostic skills, focusing student attention on correctly recognizing and diagnosing problems first rather than trying to solve them, helping students make connections between specific and general levels of problem solving, helping students apply problem-solving skills to new and unfamiliar content or situations, and responding quickly to assess correct and incorrect answers, making it possible for immediate feedback and discussion. Some of the disadvantages acknowledged include that many real-life problems are complex and do not fit easily into simple categories, and recognition of problems does not directly correlate with knowing how to solve problems. Problem resolution tasks lend themselves easily to group work, which is especially valuable for students just learning to identify problems or with a wide variety of problem recognition skills. They provide opportunities to practice and self-assess where individual students are having difficulties connecting problems with available solutions. Using this technique in class enabled me to provide immediate feedback, in many cases by asking more questions to probe deeper into the thought process to consider different angles and perspectives, while keeping students on track to find solutions using the appropriate areas of the law applicable to the case. Using this technique multiple times through a course enabled me as an instructor, as well as the students themselves, to see their progress in finding solutions to problems by following a familiar format from identifying the problem to determining a reasonable solution. This gave me confidence students were prepared for their final evaluation and gave students confidence they could effectively analyze a problem. Students saw the big picture and gained an appreciation for the deeper meaning of the course content that they could then apply to future real problems. Thank you for watching my video.